Hey everybody, welcome back. We are on Unit 4, the financial sector. We are talking about the money market. This is subunit 4.5. This is part 2. Let me get going, guys. First thing, I just want to remind you that this is the name of that graph, the money market. That graph is called the money market, but it can also be called the Liquidity Preference Model. I personally like this name as the title of that graph. However, the money market is more common, so you can see that's what I labeled it, the money market. The Liquidity Preference Model, why do I like that name? Again, because what it's really doing is modeling our preference for holding our financial wealth in liquid form. Okay, so what does that mean? It is our preference for holding our financial wealth in currency and in checking accounts and our demand deposits, okay? So liquid assets are our M1 assets. Again, M1 is an aggregate measurement of money, and what does it aggregate together? Currency in circulation and demand deposits, okay? Our preference for holding our financial wealth in those M1 assets. That's what this thing is doing. All right, let's get to the actual graph. You can see I've already labeled it, but I want to go through the axes and the curves very quickly. First, the vertical axis. What is it? It's the nominal interest rate. Why is it the nominal interest rate? And you're going to see in my explanation how I'm kind of using this language right here. The nominal interest rate is the vertical axis because it is the cost of holding your financial wealth in liquid form. Why is that? Because you are foregoing the nominal interest rate when you hold your financial wealth as currency or in your checking account. So when you do that, you really don't get a return on your money, of course not in currency, and hardly at all in a checking account, and oftentimes not at all in a checking account. And like I said, conceptually, I'd rather you just kind of think of no return on money in your checking account, no interest, and so you are foregoing the nominal interest rate. You are foregoing both the real interest rate and the inflation premium. You are foregoing both of those when you hold your financial wealth in liquid form. That's why the nominal interest rate goes there. Over here, this is quantity of money. If you write quantity of money, totally fine. It's the money market. And so quantity of money works. However, I like to put quantity of M1. Remember, M1 equals money, right? M1 equals money. M1, that monetary aggregate, is containing those two assets, currency in circulation, demand deposits, and those are the only two assets that can buy goods and services in their current form. So those two things are synonymous. Let's get to the curves, okay? Again, the money supply curve vertical. Why is the money supply curve vertical? Because it does not change when the nominal interest rate changes. The nominal interest rate can go down or up, and the money supply is not going to change. It's going to remain that amount based on the graph that I just drew. So what is determining the money supply? It must be something external to this graph, and what is it? The Fed. Now, of course, what I'm putting right here, where I draw this little arrow with the Fed, you don't ever have to do that on your graph. It's fine if you do, but you don't have to. But what this is telling me is the Fed is determining the money supply. It is super important when you draw your money market, you make the money supply curve vertical. Okay? If you make it upward sloping, you will not get credit for this graph. So it has to be vertical because people who designed this class, who designed economics, want to see that you students understand the money supply does not vary with the nominal interest rate. That's why you're making it vertical. Let's talk about money demand. It's very interesting. I've got this little kink. Not everybody draws it this way. Some people draw it kind of like this kind of like curve right here, a downward sloping curved line, perfectly fine. Okay? Other people just draw it as a linear downward sloping line, also fine, all acceptable because all this is a conceptual way of representing the money demand curve. Why do I draw it with this kink? Because I want to very much emphasize that money demand is made up of two different things. The transaction demand for money and the asset demand for money. Okay, important. Let me focus on this kink right there. At a nominal interest rate above this right here, so if our nominal interest rate gets higher, our asset demand for money will be zero. Okay, why? Because the cost of holding money is becoming very high. Now, that's not to say our quantity of money demanded is zero. We will still demand a certain amount of money. How much money will we demand? We will demand an amount of money we need to do our basic transactions, okay? In other words, this horizontal distance to that vertical portion right there is our transaction demand for money. Our demand for money to do basic transactions. That, okay, is going to be there regardless of the nominal interest rate, okay? The nominal interest rate does not affect our demand for money to do our basic transactions. We have to do those. Now, for just a second, I'm going to draw that vertical down because I want you to know that transaction demand for money never goes away, okay? But if the interest rate gets below this point right there, if it starts going down, you'll see that, hey, we're still going to demand money to do basic transactions, but then we're going to have a little bit, we're going to hold a little bit of money in regards to the asset demand for money. What is the asset demand for money? It is our demand for the financial asset money above and beyond our demand to do basic transactions. Why would we ever hold more money than we need to? Because it's convenient, right? It's nice to have a little extra money in your checking account or a little extra money in your wallet, but you're only going to hold it for convenience sake if that nominal interest rate is below a certain amount. And if that nominal interest rate keeps going down, that means the cost of money keeps going down, you will hold more and more and more of it for convenience sake, okay? So let me get rid of these dashes, all right? Get rid of that. Don't really need that. Don't need that for right now, okay? So there's our money supply and money demand. Okay, let's get to the manipulation of this graph. The number one thing this graph is going to be used for is to show the impact of monetary policy. And that's pretty doggone straightforward, guys. So let's go through it very quickly. If the Fed wants to expand the economy and wants to increase the money supply, okay, what we would do is we would show the money supply shifting to the right, and what we should notice right there is that I'd have a new equilibrium right there. That'd be my new equilibrium. That means the nominal interest rate would go down, and when that nominal interest rate went down, the cost of holding money is going down, and we would hold, that quantity demanded would increase. We would start holding more money for convenience sake, and we would move right to there. And that's what the Fed wants when they're doing easy monetary policy. They want us to hold more money because they want us to buy more goods and services, okay? Next, let's say they want to cool down the economy. Let's say we're in boom times and they want to contract the money supply. So they do things to contract the money supply. So the money supply curve would shift to the left, and of course, that nominal interest rate would go from here to an intersection point right there. So imagine I have my new equilibrium right there. That nominal interest rate would start going up, and so people would move to the left along the money demand curve, showing us that we're going to hold less money for convenience sake in regards to the asset demand for money. We'll move to right there, and that's what the Fed would want if we were booming. It's for people to hold less money and therefore buy less goods and services. That's the number one thing we need to know, is that the Fed is going to manipulate this graph. So when we're asked interest rate questions in regards to monetary policy, this is our number one graph to go to. Go to the money market. The Fed is going to shift that money supply curve, either right for expansionary or easy monetary policy, or left for contractionary or tight monetary policy. But before we get done, I want to talk about two other ways we use this graph to show an impact of something happening in society on the interest rate. And what is that? It is both national income, okay, we need to know that national income is real GDP, and the price level, okay? When national income, i.e. real GDP, or the price level change, our transaction demand for money changes, and that's going to impact the interest rate. In other words, here's a very typical question. The price level goes up, what's going to happen to the nominal interest rate? Well, if the price level goes up, that means the price of the goods and services we're buying is going up. We're going to need more money to do basic transactions. That means this curve would shift to the right, okay? This transaction demand for money would increase, and that means the whole curve would shift to the right. Money demand sub 1, what would the interest rate do? It would go up. So we're told price level goes up. What's going to have the interest rate? It's going to go up. This graph shows us that. Price level decreases. Transaction demand would decrease. That curve would shift to the left. If it shifted to the left, look at what would happen to the interest rate. It would go down. Same for national income and real GDP. You get a question that says, hey, real GDP goes up. What's going to happen to the nominal interest rate? This is the graph for you. GDP goes up, real GDP goes up. You want to shift, okay, that to the right. We're going to demand, our demand for money is going to increase to do basic transactions. As our national income goes up, interest rate goes up. Real GDP goes down, national income goes down. our interest rate is going to go down. So, for questions about the price level or real GDP, okay, this is our graph, and what are we going to shift? For these two, we're going to shift money demand. Fed shifts money supply. These two things shift money demand, and just as we finish this video off, understand, guys, if they ever mention the nominal GDP, well, how do you find the nominal GDP? That would be the price index times the real GDP. So if they ever say the nominal GDP went up, hey, awesome, demand for money. It's just a way for them to be talking about those two things, okay? So hopefully that made sense to you. Final recap. Fed shifts the money supply. Price level, real GDP, and nominal GDP, those things shift the transaction demand for money right or left, which means the entire money demand curve shifts right or left, and we just then have to look at our impact on the interest rate. Hope that made sense to you. We'll see you in the next video.